I thought it would be interesting to go back to the first things I looked at once I found out I was an INFJ, the first websites I visited to get an overview of the topic, and to see how much I agree with now that I know a lot more about myself and about INFJs in general. Some of these initial websites didn't look at the cognitive functions very much at all. They just focused on an INFJ being introverted, intuitive, feeling and judging. So I thought it could be interesting to have a look back to see the areas that it doesn't quite cover, what it misses, and whether it actually gives a wrong impression of what INFJs are like. So I'm looking at a website called verywellmind.com. This one describes INFJs as the advocate or the idealist, which we know we've been called a lot. It says that we are creative, gentle and caring. We're usually reserved but highly sensitive to how other people feel. We have high moral standards and a strong focus on the future. We enjoy thinking about deep topics and contemplating the meaning of life. We're said to be one of the rarest types, with just 1 to 3% of the population being INFJs. So far, it's a good generic overview. I mean, it could probably fit into most people. Most personality types are caring, gentle and creative. It wouldn't be specific to INFJs by any means. We can be highly sensitive to how other people feel. Well, yes, there's an element of that we'll get from our FE, but not all the time. Just because we're feeling types doesn't mean that we're always going to be focused on that. And again, you could lump in all the other feeling types too. Typically idealistic. That one will come under all intuitives mostly, especially dominant intuitive types, likely to be highly idealistic. High moral standards. Again, that will come under anyone that's more of a feeling type that focuses on their values over logic, but that could also come under a lot of thinkers. I know my ENTJ partner's got high moral standards, so again, that's not very specific at all. A strong focus on the future. That one's a little bit more specific, more of a dominant intuition, slightly more towards dominant NI focus, but again, that will encompass INTJs as well, and people with secondary NI, ENTJs and ENFJs can also be focused on the future. That's coming from the cognitive function side, but someone just looking at this in general, well, anybody can be focused on the future. You can have an ISTJ who's focused on where they see themselves in 10 years regarding their career path. Does that not make them focused on the future? It just seems very vague. What do all of these things mean? They enjoy thinking about deep topics. Doesn't everybody? What's a deep topic? A deep topic to me isn't going to be the same as a deep topic to somebody else. It's very subjective. You know, a censor coming along reading this will probably think, yeah, I'm an INFJ too. Yeah, I think about deep topics. You know, things like a gender pay gap might be a very, very deep topic for them. Whereas for me, it might be more along the lines of philosophy. Why are we here? What's our purpose in life? But then again, that's not to say that other types don't think like that too. And that we like contemplating the meaning of life. Again, doesn't everybody at some point? You know, the quarter-life crisis is becoming quite a big thing. People getting to early mid-20s and trying to figure out what they actually want to do with their future. They've gone through school, they've gone through education, they had an idea of what they wanted to do with their lives, and then as they've got older, they've realised all of the pitfalls that come along with that job. Like me, I wanted to be a detective. I loved what Sherlock Holmes did, Lewis, those sorts of TV programmes. That was what I wanted. So I set myself up. I did my A-levels and my criminology degree in order to get that. And it was only while I was at uni I realised that the role of a detective isn't quite what it's perceived to be. It's not quite how it's portrayed on TV. And so then I had to rethink. I was in the middle of a degree. Do I carry it on? I did. But then when I came out, I had to re-figure out what do I want to do with my life. I don't think that's specific to INFJs. I think many, many people can do that. Loads of people go in with an idea for a degree, and then whilst doing it, they learn more about the job they wanted, or they learn more about the subject and realise, actually, I'm not that interested. And then they have to rethink their lives. Does that make them all INFJs? I don't think so at all. We know we're not that common. So regarding, again, contemplating the meaning of life, I don't think that's something that only INFJs do. I think that's something that everybody will go through at some point, whether it's your quarter-life crisis, whether it's your midlife crisis. You'll contemplate, what have I been doing up to this point? Is my life worth it? Is it meaningful? What have I achieved? If I died tomorrow, would I be happy with what I've achieved so far? And for most people that have probably spent their time running the rat race, it gets a bit difficult to feel like life's meaningful enough. So that's why midlife crises often happen, and people go in a different direction. They change careers completely, decide they want to give up what they were doing and try something new. It's not only reserved for INFJs. There's so many types that will do that at so many different points in their lives, because it doesn't specifically say that that's something we're always doing. Yes, I know I do spend a lot of my time contemplating whether my life has meaning and purpose and what I should be doing, but it didn't give a time frame, it didn't say how often. Yes, INFJs may do this more often than other types, but just from reading that top paragraph, no wonder loads of people are mistyped as INFJs. You do your 16 personalities test, come out as an INFJ, because they only go on introverted intuition, feeling and judging. You read that and you think, yeah, I'm an INFJ. How are you not supposed to? There's no depth in that at all. They don't go into the more nitty-gritty parts of what it means to be an INFJ. The next bit I find quite funny is when they say that we're not just daydreamers or philosophers who just think about changing the world. We are capable of taking our values and using them to bring about positive and lasting change. Again, doesn't that sound like most people? There's so many different types that do that. I think everybody is capable of looking at the world, seeing an area that they think could be improved, coming up with a way of improving it, and carrying out that action. That's definitely not specific to INFJs again. This just seems to be describing all personality types, as far as I'm concerned. Looking at what they call the key INFJ characteristics, they say that with our strong sense of intuition and emotional understanding, we can be soft-spoken and empathetic, but this doesn't mean we are pushovers. We have deeply held beliefs and an ability to act decisively in order to get what we want. I wouldn't say it was a personality trait to be soft-spoken. I know I tend to be quite softly spoken. I do get told that I speak too quietly sometimes, but I wouldn't put that down to being a trait of an INFJ. Again, being empathetic. Many people are empathetic. That's not restricted to INFJs. Pretty much everybody can be empathetic. You'll get the odd few, but then that tends to go down different traits rather than personality traits. It tends to go down to, are you a sociopath or a psychopath? Normal human beings are empathetic. Some more than others, yes, but you can't cut it down black and white and say that feelers are empathetic and thinkers are not, because it's not that simple. And having deeply held beliefs and an ability to act decisively in order to get what we want, it sounds like most people. Again, if anybody has a goal that they want to achieve, as long as they've got the motivation, they'll achieve it. Motivation doesn't come from certain personality types. There are other things that can affect it, other mental illnesses, but it's not specific to personality types at all. The next characteristic is that while we are introverted by nature, we're able to form strong, meaningful connections with other people. We enjoy helping others, but also need time and space to recharge. With the last bit, needing time and space to recharge, yeah, that sort of, in a very vague way, describes being introverted. But I wouldn't say that we're the only type that are able to form strong, meaningful connections with other people. I probably wouldn't have used the words are able to form strong, meaningful connections, are more focused on, or have more of a desire to form strong, meaningful connections, potentially, but not are able to, because that sounds like extroverts can't, or other types can't. Anybody can form a connection with someone. Introverts possibly more so than extroverts in some areas, because we're not so great with small talk. So we want to form a deeper connection so we can talk about deeper topics, because that's easier for us, that's more in our comfort zone than small talk is. But that doesn't mean that extroverts can't do that. Just maybe that's more of a focus for us. The next characteristic is that while this type may be characterised by idealism, this doesn't mean that we see the world through rose-coloured glasses. We understand the world, both the good and the bad, and hope to be able to make it better. That more sounds like they've just explained what idealism is. That yes, I mean, we don't see the world through rose-coloured glasses. INFJs are very good at seeing the very best and the very worst in people, in society in general, as I've said in a few of my previous videos. So yes, we don't see the world through rose-coloured glasses. But again, this doesn't seem to be very specific to INFJs. I just think it's important, if you're trying to explain what an INFJ type is, it needs to be very specific to INFJs, because we are so misunderstood, because so many people are mistyped as INFJs, because people don't understand there's so many stereotypes going around. It can be so difficult sometimes with everybody jumping on you and saying you're not an INFJ because you don't fit in my little box of what an INFJ should be. So I think it's very important for somebody that's just going to go into detail of what they think an INFJ is and write out a page summarising the INFJ type to be very specific. because I mean, I've noticed a lot in my videos, people don't think I'm an INFJ, and I'm sure most people who are INFJs have had at least one person in their life saying, no, you're not. I find the biggest thing for me seems to be the feeling thinking side. That because I'm not overly emotional and overly sensitive and showing my feelings and throwing them out there, that I can't be a feeler, that I highly value logic and facts, that means I must be an INTJ, or must have TE high up. So I think that's why it's quite important that anybody that wants to do an overview of what an INFJ is needs to be more specific than things that 80% of other personality types can fit into most of the time. The next characteristic is that when it comes to making decisions, we place a greater emphasis on personal concerns than objective facts. We also like to exert control by planning, organising and making decisions as early as possible. When I'm making decisions, there will be certain things where it's a really tough decision to make, and so I go on what I believe is best. But personally, I tend to put more emphasis in my intuition. I sort of line all of the information up in my head, and then which do I believe is right? I'd say that was more my intuition. I write a lot of lists, I weigh up pros and cons. I don't just sit there and go, well, I feel like this is the best decision to make, and make it. Especially when it's a big one. Small, tiny little things. What colour top shall I get, blue or pink? Well, I prefer blue, so I'll pick blue. That's not what I'm talking about. It's bigger things, like if I was changing a job. I wouldn't just go on, well, I don't like this job anymore, so I'm going to change jobs. It's never that simple. I always like to give it time. I'd like to weigh up the pros and cons. Can I find another job that's that ticks more boxes than the one I currently have? What do I not like about the job I have? Is it the hours? Is it the pay? Is it the work I'm doing? Am I not feeling fulfilled enough? Am I not being challenged enough? Do I have to work hours I don't like? I'll have to figure out what it is that I don't like about the job that I currently have, and then try and look for another job that gives me more along the lines of what I want. I'd never just go, oh, I don't like this job, and then jump into another job that without going through that process, because it may end up worse. It may not actually improve anything at all, and then I've just wasted time having to do my CV, fill out an application form, go for an interview, when maybe there's nothing else on the market that is better than what I currently have. The next thing they talk about is the strengths and weaknesses of the type. So our strengths, if we're sensitive to the needs of others, yes, we can be. Not all the time, but when we want to be, yes, we can use our FE and understand the needs of other people and meet them. We are reserved. Not sure why they call that a strength. I wouldn't say it's a strength, I wouldn't say it's a weakness, it's just we can be quite reserved, we can be quite mysterious. We are highly creative and artistic. There are more creative artistic people than us, I'd say. All the stereotypes of the ISFP and the INFP, they're supposed to be a lot more creative than we are. Yes, we have intuition, which is creative, but it's the way we get it out there in the world. I wouldn't say we're going to be the ones that are going to go and paint beautiful pictures and write wonderful poems and that sort of thing. I wouldn't say that was a defining characteristic of us. Yes, we can be creative, but yeah, there's things that I think define us more than that. Another strength is that we are focused on the future. Yeah, that can be a strength and a weakness, because the future's unknown, so we're just going down on our best predictions of what we think will happen. But if we have a misguided view of the future or of ourselves, then that's likely to be quite negative and can cause problems. We value close, deep relationships. Are there any types that hate close, deep relationships? Are there any types that only want superficial relationships with absolutely everybody? I wouldn't say there were. I'd say that could be a weakness quite a lot, because we struggle with only superficial relationships. We struggle with only small talk and never getting to a deeper level with friends. That sort of puts us off wanting to spend time with them if we know that we're only going to be talking about a handful of shallow subjects. We're never going to be able to get into the deep nitty-gritty because of whatever reason. The next strength is that we enjoy thinking about the meaning of life. Not quite sure why that's classed as a strength either. Maybe because we aren't just going to waste our lives away doing nothing. Maybe that could be what they mean by strength. And the last one is that we are idealistic. Again, that can be a strength and a weakness. It can be great because we want the best future we can find and we want to do all these wonderful things to make the world a better place, but it can also leave us burned out if we're too busy focused on saving the world that we forget to look down at ourselves and see what we need. I could definitely come up with a much better list of strengths. But yeah, we're just focusing on this website for now, so we'll see what they say. For weaknesses, they say we can be overly sensitive. Well, yeah, we can be. Tend to be when we're younger and more immature INFJs, but as we get older and more mature, our TI comes out a lot more, and I sort of think of that as a bit of a defense mechanism, that it protects me from being hurt, protects my FE from going over the top and ending up becoming a doormat. So I'd stick that as a weakness for young or immature INFJs, ones that don't know that they're INFJs, haven't learnt anything about personality types and haven't focused on growing themselves at all. Yes, they might be overly sensitive, but as soon as you begin to grow and understand more about yourself, I think that disappears, or at least reduces a lot. The next weakness is that we can be difficult to get to know. Well, so can most introverts. You've got to take the time. I wouldn't say that was a weakness. It's nice to not know someone from 5 seconds of meeting them, know everything about them. Then there's no need to carry on a conversation and actually form a relationship with this person. You want there to be things that you don't know, that you learn over time. When you begin to trust them more, they begin to trust you. You make memories together. I wouldn't say that would be a weakness at all. Why would you want to know someone in the first 5 seconds? Surely you want there to be things that you learn over time about the person. Keeps you interested in the relationship. The next weakness is that we can have overly high expectations. Yes, that actually is a point for INFJs. Well done, found one. But specifically towards ourselves, yes, we can have overly high expectations of relationships. A lot of people have said that INFJs can find it difficult to make friends because of what they want in a friendship. I guess, like I was just saying, you don't want someone that all you can do is talk about the weather and what was on TV last week. You want someone that you can go that deeper level. But then it's just a case of finding someone that you can. Not everybody wants to do that, that's fair enough, but there are plenty of people that do. I wouldn't say that was a high expectation, that's just a preference. Just like the other person clearly does not want to go into the deep topics of philosophy and psychology and all the rest of it. That's their expectation, is they want to stay on the surface level, so why would mine be higher an expectation than theirs? But yeah, we do definitely have high expectations of ourselves. I know I do, like I've said in a previous video, because it's what I know I can achieve personally. If I believe I can do better than what I've done, then I will want to. My expectations are based solely on what I know I can achieve. So it might seem high to some people, but I know myself. So if I know I've slacked off, or I didn't get enough sleep so I couldn't concentrate or whatever, then I'm not going to think that was good enough. The next weakness is that we are stubborn. Yes, again, we can be very stubborn, but I wouldn't say that was specific to INFJs at all. My ENTJ partner, I think, is much more stubborn than I am in certain areas. I'd say I was stubborn regarding values, things that are non-negotiable for me, but most other areas that are not so black and white, I will give in if the other person is adamant they want it. Like where to eat, I'm not going to get funny and stubborn about, no, I only want to eat at this certain place. If the other person wants to eat somewhere else, then I'm happy to go to that place, because there's no point having an argument over something so small. So stubborn about our values, yes, but stubborn in general, no, I don't think we are. And the next one is dislikes confrontation. We do dislike confrontation, but I'm more than happy to have it, again, if someone goes against my values, or if someone's not holding up their end of the bargain. So if I've paid someone to do a job and they've not done that job, I'm more than happy to stand up to them and say, I'd like you to do this again, please, and do it properly. So naturally, yes, I don't like confrontation, but I can see areas where it's needed, and I've learned over time to deal with it much better. I've worked as a security officer, and I've had plenty of people threaten me with all sorts of weapons just so they can go out the door. I've had to have a lot of confrontation with people. So I've learnt to see where it can be useful. It's never something that I will enjoy doing, but I don't think that's a weakness. I think people that enjoy confrontation, that probably is more of a weakness, because they're likely to start arguments all the time just because they enjoy it. like disliking confrontation is probably more of a strength, because it means we're likely to value harmonious relationships and want to do everything we can to resolve things before it turns into a confrontation. This website then goes very, very briefly into the cognitive functions that INFJs have, but yeah, well, we'll see. So focusing on the dominant introverted intuition, it says that it means that we tend to be highly focused on our internal insights. Not quite sure what exactly that would mean to someone reading this for the first time. That once we have formed an intuition about something, an opinion about something, once we've formed an intuition about something, whatever that means, we tend to stick to it very tightly, often to the point of being single-minded in our focus. And because of this, we are sometimes viewed as being stubborn and unyielding. So basically, introverted intuition is bad because it means we're stubborn. There's an awful lot more about introverted intuition than us being single-minded and stubborn. It means we are able to see patterns very clearly, base things on past behaviour, on things we've picked up on, and we're able to predict to quite a good degree of accuracy what we think is going to happen next in certain circumstances. It doesn't just mean we're stubborn. I guess that's where they got their weakness of us being stubborn from. They think introverted intuition is a bad thing, so that once we think about something, that's it. We don't take any more logic on board, we don't take anybody else's opinions, that's it. Well, maybe they've met someone who's incredibly unhealthy as an INFJ. Maybe if you're stuck in your NITI loop, possibly you might not want to take on board anything else, but any moderately healthy INFJ is going to know that they don't know everything. And we know that we need to use our SE to take in further information. We can't just base everything solely on an idea that's popped into our head. But that's really not going to give someone a very good understanding of dominant introverted intuition. It's such a complex cognitive function to try and understand, probably the hardest, and all they can come up with is that we're going to be highly focused on our internal insights, and once we figure something out, we'll stick to it and become stubborn. I don't think that explains NI at all. Moving on to our auxiliary and extroverted feeling, they say this characteristic makes INFJs highly aware of what other people are feeling, but it means we are sometimes less aware of our own emotions. So far that's fairly correct, yes. Having FI lower down in our function stack means it's a bit more difficult for us to identify how we're feeling. We often need to extrovert that process, so we'll need to write it down, we'll need to speak to someone, we'll need to watch something, listen to something to get some information of, oh, I get it, that's how I feel. We will connect that way. We can't just go inside and figure out I'm feeling this. We might get the base emotions, I'm feeling happy, sad, angry, scared, whatever, but we don't tend to go much further than that. We can't really figure out where the feeling has come from, why it's there, and how to resolve it without extroverting it one way or another. So that's very simplistic but fairly correct. We are very good at reading other people. It's not completely due to our FE, it's also due to our NI as well. That makes us very good at reading other people and figuring out how they're feeling. We're good at picking up on body language as well. And the next point is that INFJs sometimes struggle to say no to other people's requests. That we are so attuned to what other people are feeling that we fear causing disappointment or hurt feelings. Again, that one goes down to FE's valuing harmony, and I'd say probably is more focused towards immature INFJs. That yes, I'm sure most of us when we were younger struggled to say no. I know I definitely did. I didn't want to upset people, I didn't want to start an argument, so I just go along with it and lock down my feelings. It often wasn't conscious. Most of the time I wasn't quite sure how I was feeling. I'd just come home feeling cross, wouldn't know why. I'd just feel a bit disappointed, but I wouldn't be able to identify that it was the fact that I'd agreed to someone else's decision without adding in my 2 cents. So again, yeah, this is more focused towards immature INFJs. They don't really show mature ones, which I think is why so many people struggle to type INFJs. I guess it's the same that I've noticed with my mum as an ENFP, that everybody just thinks they're flighty, they can't hold a job, and they just want to run about across the country the whole time, finding new wonderful experiences, and don't want to get stuck down to a person or a job or a house or anything. So that's the impression that people tend to get. They don't realise that as we mature and grow, all these things that make us swing like a pendulum around based on our personality will even out a lot more. That INFJs won't be so FE heavy and want to please everybody, that when we get more mature, our TI comes out a lot more. We stop being big people pleasers and we realise, actually, what's important to me? What do I want to do right now? We stop and ask ourselves that, which I guess leads to people looking at us and going, you can't be an INFJ because you're not a people pleaser. You must be an INTJ or an ENTJ because you seem far too logical. But whereas maybe actually I've just worked on my personality type, so it's not a case of I'm mainly NI with really good FE, crappy TI and horrific SE. Maybe I'm actually fairly good at all four of them now. Maybe I'm starting to work on my shadow functions too. I can be quite good with NE sometimes. I can sit and come up with a million different ideas of how things can be good, what we can do differently. That doesn't all of a sudden make me NE dominant. It's just realising that as we grow, we become better at all of our functions, we become more well-rounded, and that it may be a little bit more difficult to tell what personality type we have, because all of these things that we're told about our personalities of, oh gosh, yeah, INFJs are incredibly stubborn and are people pleasers. That's contradictive in itself, but anyway, you realise that actually we're neither of those, because we can understand our own weaknesses, we can understand where it's more important to listen to somebody else or focus on what we believe is right, that, yeah, all of the rough edges begin to get smoothed out over time, and you don't need to be 60 years old to have achieved this. You can be 25 and be well on your way to working through some of the rough edges of your personality type. Anyway, moving on to our tertiary introverted thinking. This says that INFJs make decisions based on ideas and theories that we form based on our own insights. It sounds like they're isolating introverted thinking. It's not completely based on our own insights. It's not just on everything we know. TI by itself will do that, but we will use SE an awful lot with our TI because that's how we gather information. But that in itself isn't too wrong. The next point is that we rely primarily on our introverted intuition and extroverted feeling when making decisions, particularly when we are around other people. When we are alone, however, we may rely more on our introverted thinking. Yes, I'd say that would make sense, because around other people means that FE is going to come out a lot more because it's the extroverted function. It's not all about what works best for us, what's our own personal truth. We need to involve other people, so yes, we'll definitely turn to FE a lot more when we're around other people. And yeah, when we're alone, we don't need our FE as much. So TI is going to come out a lot more, like I'm sure you notice on my videos. I'm mainly using my NI and my TI because I'm sat here by myself talking into a camera. There are no other people around, so I can't use my FE because that has to bounce off of other people. I have to just stick with my TI a bit more, so I'm going to come across a little bit more logical than if I was talking to an actual audience or to somebody else. Then my FE would come out a lot more because I could then read their facial expressions, their body language, their tone of voice, and adjust myself accordingly. But I can't do that at the moment, it's just me. And then the next point is that in stressful situations, we might try to rely on our emotions when making decisions, especially if it means pleasing other people. Under less stressful conditions, we're more likely to rely on our intuition. I don't know why they've popped that in with introverted thinking, because it doesn't involve introverted thinking at all. But again, that's more for an immature INFJ. Yes, they may rely on emotions, but as you grow and mature, you've experienced an awful lot, so you can pull on your previous experiences. So stressful situations, we're likely to have experienced something similar, if not the same, before. And I know for a fact with me, when I'm stressed, I don't just jump the gun and focus on my emotions. If I can, if it's not something I have to decide immediately, I will pull myself away to one side, get out a notebook, write down a list of pros and cons, figure it out that way. So I pull heavily on my TI if I'm stressed, because organising and planning things definitely calms me down. Popping things back into a form of order and control is something that INFJs do often find helps them when they're stressed. So yeah, we're not going to jump straight into people-pleasing boat, especially not more mature INFJs. Under less stressful conditions, we're more likely to rely on our intuition. We always rely on our intuition. If it's something we have to decide on immediately, then it's a bit more difficult to pull on intuition, because NI can take a while to come up with answers. So we might have to jump into FE and TI and see which one we could use to decide on immediately, assess the situation around us, probably pull on our SE quite a lot if the situation's stressful. So yes, when it's less stressful, when we have more time, we can use our NI a lot more. Then finally on to our inferior extroverted sensing. They say that while this is a less developed and largely unconscious aspect of the INFJ, it does have an impact on personality. I'm not sure it's unconscious. I'd say more the shadow functions are unconscious. I'm aware of my SE. I'm aware that I enjoy gathering information. I enjoy beautiful scenery and nature outside. It's more, I think SE can be used to either stress us out massively or calm us down. It flips around like that. It's not something we pull on normally in a day-to-day life when we're just going about our day. It'll be more something we'll pull on when we're in a stressful situation to calm us down. If there's too much noise, lights, people, whatever, we'll then have to use our SE and go, right, well then I need quiet right now, I need to find somewhere dark. Or if we're struggling with something, then we need to go out and walk around in nature and listen to music. The next point is that this aspect of our personality helps us to pay attention to the world around us and stay aware of our surroundings. Yes, it does, but not by itself, because if we only relied on our inferior SE to stay aware of our surroundings, we'd be forever walking into things, because I'm sure most of us spend about 99.9% of the time in our own heads, planning things out, running around with NI. That's not the only thing that helps us to pay attention to our surroundings. I think it can help us when we're doing things, like when I'm riding my motorbike, I'll be pulling on my SE a fair bit more because I'm having to assess the environment around me all the time. Or playing sports, you'll have to use your SE a fair bit too. Make sure you can hit that ball when you're playing baseball or whatever. The next point is that SE also helps us to better live in the present moment rather than simply worrying about the future. Sort of going back to my previous point that yes, SE can be great if you're stressing and worrying about everything. Everything seems to be getting on top of you, to just go for a nice quiet walk somewhere, quiet your NI a little bit, let it run in the background a bit more, and then be able to just focus on what's happening around you, the smell of freshly cut grass, the sound of the birds, the feel of the wind on your face, that sort of thing. And the last point is that this aspect of our personality helps us to appreciate physical activities such as hiking and dancing, and also beautiful things like wonderful architecture or a beautiful painting or a wonderful sunset. It helps us to appreciate the small beautiful things that we come across in our daily life. On the last bit of this website that I'll go into, it does talk about personal relationships, career paths and tips for interacting with us, which maybe I'll do another time. I just thought it was interesting. They've got a list of 5 people that they think are INFJs. First one is Oprah Winfrey. Definitely don't think she's introverted. More people seem to think she's an ENFJ, potentially another type. Next one is Martin Luther King Jr. Quite difficult to tell because we don't have too much to go on, but he's very idealistic, so potentially that's what they're going on for classing him as an INFJ. The third one is Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. I remember reading that when I was in year 9, I think. Yeah, potentially. Might have to read that again to see if he actually is. The next one is Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst that actually came up with a lot of the foundations of MBTI. Again, there's not too much to go on of him as a person rather than what he's done. It can be very difficult to type people when you're just looking at a small aspect of themselves, just reading a book, just watching a video. You want to interact with them on a day-to-day life to see how they do things, how they think, how they act, rather than just a certain part of themselves that they are putting out there into the world in whatever way. The last one is Taylor Swift. I don't think she's an INFJ at all. Not quite sure what type she is, but Yeah, I don't know about her personally, so maybe she is. Maybe behind the scenes she's a completely different person to the one she puts on stage. I know that's something that INFJs often do, but I don't get the impression that she's an INFJ from what I've seen. I know one I came across quite recently that seems to be typed as an INFJ that I've definitely identified with from every time I've watched it is James Hathaway from Lewis, the TV series, the detective TV series. It was quite interesting when I found that out and started watching it again recently and found out he is likely to be typed as an INFJ. I can definitely see that. I've always sort of felt like I could understand him, and it's quite interesting to see. And the other one I know I've mentioned before is Sam Winchester from Supernatural, but I know that one goes more down the fact that of his superpowers that he gets at a bit of a later stage of being able to predict things and see visions about things that are going to happen. I haven't watched enough of that series to see about his specific personality type, but it does sort of lean towards INFJ, so he could be as well. So it was interesting to take a little look at an overview that many people will get when they either are typed as an INFJ, hear someone is an INFJ, or just come across the term and wonder, because, you know, INFJs are spoken about a lot as the rarest type, so they're likely to want to look up what an INFJ is, and I don't think this specific website gives that much of an overview of what specifically an INFJ is. There are many points that could be attributed to loads of different types, and a lot of the specifics, especially about NI, all seem quite negative. That would make you think you don't want to be an INFJ or an INTJ because NI makes you stubborn. But as people that have looked into it more know, there's so much more to having NI, especially dominant. But yeah, I hope you found it interesting. As always, thank you for your time.